All right. And I have started the recording, and I want to just introduce myself and say my name is Kat Fribley. I will do a brief visual description. I am a fat, white, middle-aged, mid 50s woman. I have two, now that I'm looking at them, really messy buns of purple and gray hair. I just sort of rolled out this morning and into work. I have on some black hoop earrings and a black and white striped sweater. And behind me is a very bright red wall with a bunch of plants and a bookshelf. And I am so delighted to be able to host today the sixth, I think, in our series of webinars through our Birdability outreach program. This is part of an endeavor that is funded by the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation's Quality of Life grant awards. And we have been so delighted to welcome a number of birders with different disabilities to talk with us about their birding experiences and share information. And today, I wanted to give you a couple of quick updates before we get started with our amazing guests. I wanted to let you know that the chat is turned off for general chatting. You are welcome to chat. It will come directly to me, but in order to spare the screen readers of folks who are here, we have disabled the chat for our time together. If you have any trouble in terms of technology, please do feel free to reach out to Zoom about that by using the button at the bottom. And if you need anything in terms of accessibility or access, please reach out to me using chat. All right. Well, friends, today we're going to talk about the power of birdsong, and I could not think of two better people to have this conversation with than Jerry Berrier and Susan Glass. And I'm wondering if the two of you would mind introducing yourself. And Susan, since you're immediately to my right on the screen, I'm wondering if you would start us off and introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit of a story about how birdsong has impacted your life or connected you to nature.
Sure, very happy to do that. My name is Susan Glass. Thank you so much for this meeting this morning. It's a joy. I am a 68, almost 69-year-old woman with long gray blonde hair, and I'm thin, and I'm proud of getting older. So there, it's a lot of fun. I would
Yes.
say, yeah, I mean, it's just fine. Birdsong has really been with me, I want to say, even in my consciousness pre-lingually, because I was born in Michigan, and I remember distinctly two things. One was that I would go out in the garden and I would hear sounds, and they turned out to be American robins and crows and later some cardinals. And I would follow those sounds up and down the street. We had no fences. I didn't have a cane. I was a little tiny thing, but I wanted to know what that was. And before I knew anything about science, I thought that the sky was making those sounds. And I would just keep following it around. And then, I remember my mother explaining that the birds were doing that and showing me how to fill the bird feeder. And she was a very deep nature committed person. I remember sitting in the grass with her, and she'd say, "Now this is a butterfly," or "Oh, that ratchet rant you're hearing, that's a blue jay, and it just scooped up a bug." um, and I remember that very clearly. I remember waking on a Saturday morning to the sound of crows, and they were flying all over the neighborhood, and I started to be able to plot distance just by listening to those crows. It was so fascinating to me. And then we had a cabin on Lake Erie, and it was full of in the springtime of purple martins, which are beautiful swallows that make a liquidy sound, and they're great for taking care of mosquitoes, by the way. But mom told me all about them, and I said, "Well, why aren't they here when we come back in the fall?" And she said, "Well, they have to fly away. They go south." I said, "Well, where's south?" She said, "Well, that's Mexico." I have to tell you that birds are responsible for my first interest in world geography. I started learning, figuring out where they went. And it's kind of been that way ever since. And I have stories about birding records and mom
Mhm.
feeding that knowledge. And it was just
Mhm.
my life all the way through to college, where I took ornithology courses and followed me to California. But I don't want to hog airtime because Jerry
Oh,
has some real interesting stories too. But it's always been, I mean, as I said, I think it's prelingual. I
yeah.
think it's I'm listening for it. Even if I'm in a busy city, I'm looking for, the nearest pigeon or
Yeah.
rock dove because I just want to know
Absolutely.
what's there. I'll stop for now. That's fine.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you, Susan. I love the ways birdsong defined the geography of your childhood.
Yes. Yes.
Jerry,
Very.
I'm really curious about, would you introduce yourself and share just a little bit about how birdsong has impacted your life?
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Jerry Berrier, located in Malden, Massachusetts, and I am a 72-year-old blind man, been blind since birth. The only sight I ever had was light perception, which is really not seeing. I couldn't see colors or anything like that. My interest in birds was pretty casual, though, until I got into college. Oh, let me describe myself a little more. I guess I'm a medium build kind of a guy, relatively good shape for somebody my age because when I retired 3 years ago, I started exercising, and I find that it really helps me not only physically, but psychologically also.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm an okay looking guy. Um,
I will confirm. I will confirm. And you give a mean hug. I'm going to
And
also
you
say that as
certainly have a
well.
warm voice, and that's
yeah.
another
Yes,
thing. Yes.
such a warm voice, indeed.
So, yeah, so I started, I was in a biology class when I was in a sophomore in college in 1972. And the professor really probably never realized what a wonderful gift he gave me, but he couldn't figure out what to do with this blind guy in the lab portion of the course. So he came up with the idea that he would let me borrow his Cornell University bird
Mm.
sounds records, and they were records back then.
Mhm.
And he said, take these home to your dorm and study them, listen to them. And at the end of the semester, you and I will go for a walk in the woods, and your grade is going to be based on how well you identify some of them. And at first, I was totally just, I just couldn't imagine learning them. They all sounded the same.
Yeah.
But by the semester's end, I was hooked. No two ways about it. And I got an A in the lab portion of the course. I don't even remember what I got in the rest of my grade, but I've been birding ever since and enjoying it immensely.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I love the very different ways that you all came to birding and began paying attention to bird song or recognizing bird song. Um, can you tell us, just as we're starting off, what some of your favorite bird sounds are? And maybe why they stand out to you. Jerry, do you want to start us off on this one and then we'll go to Susan?
Sure. One of my absolute favorites is Baltimore Orioles. They have a beautiful, very striking sound in my mind. They sort of sound a little bit like robins, but when you hear one and you know what you're hearing, they have a striking sound. And I love it. I mean, I'm elated when I hear the first one of the season.
Mm.
And then if I go out birding a few days later, after I hear about 100 of them, I think, okay, I'm ready for something else. So that's one of mine. But I love listening to crows. I love hearing all the
Mm.
different sounds they make. I
Mhm.
like cardinals also. I think they have one of the purest, clearest sounds of all the
Mhm.
birds.
Mhm. Susan, how about you?
Before I speak, Jerry, I have to thank you for a recording you sent me of crows. I had never heard so many vocalizations. They are brilliant birds, and they have such a cool social structure. So thank you for that recording. That was just I keep those things. That's awesome. Um, One of my favorite birds is the western meadowlark. I live in Central
Oh.
California in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I too am blind, totally blind, except for light perception, and have been since birth. But when we first moved here, the very first bird sound that greeted us in the morning were these western meadowlarks, and they're very cheerful and clear and warm in their whistles. And the mnemonic I have for them is "I'm telling on you." That's how, and they say it really quickly. And sometimes they change the emphasis. They say, "I'm telling on you. I'm telling on. I'm telling on." But in any case, that's the sound, but it's happy like that, but it's very liquid like, almost flute like. And they have wonderful little clicking calls that they make in the grass. They nest in the grass and on the ground. And when I'm out in the fields, I can hear and that's how I know it's spring too, is the meadowlarks are telling on me, and the Springfield crickets are back. And it's just a wonderful combination, I think. Another of my favorites is the golden crown sparrow. And this is a large song sparrow, a New World sparrow, and comes here from Alaska and lives here in the winter. Very, very clear, plaintive whistle. Sounds like it's saying, I am leaving. I am. Very pretty little whistles. And they sing when they first come, and then you just kind of hear their chirping in the winter. And then as they get ready to return to Alaska, which they're doing now, the singing starts up again. So those are two of my favorites.
Well, and Susan, let me tell you that the eastern meadowlark says spring of the year.
Isn't that lovely? Spring up. And so you know it's spring when you've got that lark.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
lovely.
you all, I am right in between you. We have an East Coast and a West Coast, and I am in Iowa, and I get Western meadowlarks in the winter occasionally, and Eastern meadowlarks from spring on. So I'm incredibly lucky because I'm occasionally able to hear Western meadowlarks, but as soon as spring comes, indeed, the Eastern meadowlarks are back to being some of my favorite bird song in
lovely.
this area. Yeah, I feel so lucky for that. And I love, Susan, you've already been teaching us mnemonics and the ways that it sounds like you identify birds through their calls and songs. And I know, Jerry, you're also a mnemonics user and learner for birdsong. I'm really curious, like what kinds of challenges and rewards come with that approach to birding. And if you, Jerry, want to talk just a little bit more about that to start off with, and then we'll go back to Susan.
Well, I would like to say that I've made up all my own mnemonics, but I really haven't. So you can find long lists of them. And a good example of a mnemonic that's very easy to learn is, and I learned this right in the very beginning, is that the eastern towhee, which I think used to be called the rufous-sided towhee, it says, drink your tea.
Yes, it does. It laughs like that at the end, doesn't it?
You can really tell.
It does. And so a lot of birds, people with good imaginations have come up with a mnemonic that's, once you hear it, like the barred owl, it goes something like, ooh, 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 ah. And everybody says that it's saying, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? And there are dozens of them. I could go on and on, but I won't.
Well, I think that mnemonics are kind of magical trick for the brain. And I will tell you, I have invented absolutely none because that is not how my brain works. But I have learned so many from you, from Susan, from others that have been incredibly useful to me as someone who is not blind and does not have low vision, but has a neurological difference called aphantasia, meaning that I see no pictures in my head. I have no mind's eye. And so I don't rely on visuals as much to identify birds as I do on sounds. I can identify them, but it takes a long time, a lot of repetition for me to visually identify them, much more so than song. And mnemonics have just been such an entryway, a gateway for me into being able to identify many more birds than I was able to visually. Susan, how about you? How did you come to mnemonics? Did you create your own?
Oh no, I start like Jerry. I started from the list, and then I invented a few of my own. By the way, I've never heard of your particular disability of the mind not having pictures. I'd love to chat with you about that at length, because that actually can change how you create and make it really beautiful in different ways. It's always things turn. I'm like Jerry. I picked up the mnemonics from a lot of other people. There's one out here. We have a bird called an olive-sided flycatcher, and people say it says, quick, 3 beers.
Yep.
And sometimes instead of a mnemonic, I invent a sound. For instance, our largest woodpecker here is the acorn woodpecker. And to me, he sounds like he's saying, brata, 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 brata. And so I just, I make that sound and people look at me like I've lost my mind, but it works, it's what
Yes.
the bird actually sounds like to me.
Yes. What are some of the ones that the two of you feel like are pretty distinct or easy? I know you've mentioned a couple of them. Most of us, I think, are pretty familiar with who cooks for you, who cooks for
Yeah.
you all, right? Like that is
Yeah.
I think one that is fairly distinct and easily recognizable. Are there some other calls or songs that you think are really good ones for beginners to start with in terms of their song or their mnemonics?
Well, there's the Carolina wren. One of the things that people say it sounds like is tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. That one's not so easy for me, but because it also makes a lot of other sounds.
Mhm.
But another one would be the tufted titmouse, which
Oh, yeah.
says either chiva, 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 or here, depending on how it feels that day.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, cardinal says, well, no, let's go with the robin.
Oh, yeah.
Robin says, cheer up, cheerily, cheer up. And
Mhm.
it's not one of the most beautiful sounds in my mind, but it's certainly one that I like to hear.
And
Uh,
recognizable. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Susan, how about
And
in the West?
well, another one, well, this is a bird that's everywhere that
Oh,
just
yeah.
about mourning doves. And a lot of people, when they hear
Oh,
mourning doves, they think they're hearing owls
yes.
because the mourning dove is hoo,
Oh, yeah.
hoo, hoo, hoo. But the great horned owl doesn't sound like that. It's a deeper voice and it's hoo, 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 hoo. And if you hear an owl and then hear a mourning dove, you can separate them very easily ever after, but they are everywhere.
Yes.
And just about any soundscape I've ever heard ends up with mourning doves either in the foreground or in the background. Would you say,
Mhm.
Jerry? They're quite
Y-
prolific.
yes. And do you
Yeah.
do you know the mnemonic for a great horned owl?
What?
It's
Mm-mm.
who's awake? Me too.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
I
beautiful.
love it.
I'll remember that tonight because we
Yeah.
have a pair nearby. Who's awake? Me too.
Yep.
I must tell you, by the way, that I never heard a barred owl until I was out in Cummington, Massachusetts.
Oh,
And I woke up and I heard the sound at night and I ran to the breakfast table to the other people living there and I said, "What is that? Was it a fox?" No, that's an owl. That's not an owl. Yes, it is. It's called a barred owl. And then I learned about the wing bars and what it looks like and all that stuff. But that was magic for me to be told
Yeah.
that sound I'd never heard before. There's this thrill that goes through your whole body when you learn something like that and you never forget learning it.
I was out on a January, I think it was January, early in the morning. It was 0 degrees outside, and I had a guide dog at the time, and she insisted on going out at 6 a.m. And I
Yeah.
was out there just kind of, murmuring to myself, saying, "This is awful. I don't want to be out here." And
Brr.
all of a sudden, I heard two great horned owls in flight, staying in contact with each other. Who's awake?
Oh,
Me too. Who's awake? Me too. And it like buoyed
yeah.
me up, I think, for a month. I mean, it
Yes.
affected my life. I
Yes.
just,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
loved it.
I get a shiver when you tell that story. I mean, and
Yeah.
suddenly you're very grateful to that early relieving dog.
Yes. I
Yes.
loved my dog after that. I loved the cold, everything.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
so delighted because both of you have just told stories that were about like how much it uplifted or brought you joy or
Mhm.
just a shiver of absolute like novelty and newness. And research has certainly been suggesting that birdsong overall,
Mhm.
reduces stress and improves mood. I'm such a believer in the mental health
Mhm.
benefits of birding overall, but in particular bird song and sounds. And I'm really
Mhm.
curious. It sounds like you all have certainly experienced that in terms of getting to hear a bird and have it be an instant effect on your mental health and well-being.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you name as the greatest contributors to that effect of bird song and bird sounds? Susan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm thinking about my mother, who was such a
Yeah.
supreme lover of all natural things. She
Mm,
died in 2019, and we were quite twinned in many ways.
yeah.
And birds help me through my periods of grieving. You know, she died in May, and we're coming up on that. But one of the things I remember is she loved the return of swallows. And in California, we had tree swallows, cliff swallows, bank swallows. But in our garden, the big trellis that she planted, there were violet green swallows, and they squeak. They sound almost like little squeaky screen doors to me. It's a very unusual sound. But when I hear those, I feel that she's back. You know, I feel that she's visiting again, and I don't live in that home anymore, but I can see the garden. I can see the live oak tree out there. I can see where she planted the climbing trellis. I can see the bedded plants across the way. And I feel like if I can honor that memory in that way, you know, that's really important. And so I look for my swallows every year, just as I look for my golden crowned sparrows, and they very much attach me to her presence. I also find if I've had a really difficult day and my senses are overloaded, if I can just get into a quiet place with birds, I'm not particularly trying to identify and one bird, I'm just sitting very still, that a lot of the stuff that's been bugging me, the static goes away and I get a quiet internally. Do you find any of that, Jerry?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
I'm going to tell a story that I've never told publicly before, but I think it's an important one to this topic. Um, my first wife died in 2016, and I was devastated, as you might expect. And I don't know, maybe 6 weeks later, I was out walking on the campus of the Perkins School for the Blind, where I had moved to at that point. I had gotten an apartment right off the campus, and I heard a screech owl, which I don't hear those very often, but I heard one very clearly, but it was very far away. And I decided I'm going to go see if I can get closer to it. And everywhere I went, I could still hear it, but I wasn't getting any closer. And in my kind of I don't know how to describe it, but my mind that was mixed up and sad and everything, that bird began to be symbolic of my wife. And it seemed as though it was saying, "You can hear me. I'm fine. I'm doing well. Yes, you won't be able to reach me anymore. We can't get close to each other, but I'm doing fine. And I want you to know that." And I believed it. I chose to believe that. And that was a beautiful experience for me.
And it'll always be with you. I mean,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is so powerful. My father loved raptors, and when he died, we went out to Half Moon Bay one day, which was one of his favorite places, and this red no, it was a white shoulder. No, it was a I don't think it was a red. It was a red-shouldered hawk, not a red tail. It kept appearing everywhere we went. It just kept appearing on railings. It appeared outside the restaurant we were eating at. I mean, I don't know. You know, you can say what you want, but that was quite moving. Just that Dad was kind of following us around. It
Yep.
was fun.
And
Yeah.
and it's nice to believe things like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially in times of great sadness. And
Yeah.
but even beyond that, for me, one of the things that has kept me involved with birding is that I believe that as a blind person, I miss a lot of the joy, a lot of the beauty that I hear people talking about. You can describe something beautiful to me all day, and I'm still not going to understand it. But to
Right.
me, the bird sounds and the feeling of being in the woods and the smells of the pine trees and things like that, that's where I get beauty from. And I find it, I feel that it's my responsibility to find beauty wherever I can to
Mhm.
try and make up for the deficit that I feel I have because of not being able to see. And birds are probably the biggest thing to do that for me.
The sounds of birds, yeah, are so beautiful in so many ways.
Hmm.
And I love what I think, Susan, you were saying earlier about when you're having a rough day and just taking a break and immersing yourself in birdsong, not for identification or counting or any of those things, but rather just to be infused with the world around us, that it can hold us in those ways, right? And
Yeah.
I feel deeply the same when I'm having a hard time. Almost instantly I go to the back deck and I sit
Mhm.
and I have feeders, and I live in Iowa, so I have a pretty standard about 15 or 20 different kinds of birds that come to my yard. And one of the things that brings me just such a deep sense of groundedness is actually chickadees, black-capped chickadees. They are, I always say you can count on chickadees. We're always going to have them in our backyard. They are always going to be da-dee. And it allows me to just feel this something both of you I think have mentioned, sense of place, sense of belonging in the
Yeah,
world.
yeah, yeah.
Those chickadees really provide that to me in such a deep and beautiful way. And as someone who is a trauma survivor and navigates the world with complex PTSD, the sound of birds and observing birds has been one of the most grounding and healing things that I experience. And so birdsong in and of itself is a tool, a therapy, a joy. And I love your concept, Jerry, a way of honoring the beauty, right? That
Mhm.
exists
Yeah.
in this world.
I had
I,
a funny experience with a bird a couple of years ago that wasn't beautiful, but it was very funny. I was with my brother and we went to it was actually a haven for orphan pet birds. And I don't know where they got the birds from. I guess if somebody had a bird and they died,
Yes.
this place would take the bird. Anyway, they had cockatoos there. And we were outside walking and I heard something say, "How you doing?" And I said, "I'm fine. How are you?" And my brother laughed his head off. He said, "That was one of the birds." I thought it was a little kid.
love it.
Yeah, so fun. So fun. Sometimes birdsong isn't beautiful, right?
Oh, right.
Sometimes it is bird sounds or bird songs are not the they're still beautiful, but they're not the melodious kind of song
Right.
that we think about. But I have to tell you, even that, brings joy. This a few weeks ago on travel back from Vermont to Iowa, we stopped and stayed at a lodge in a state park in Indiana. And I woke up to the sound of sandhill cranes. Uh, and
Oh,
instantly, like that sound, I don't think anyone would call it melodious,
No.
but but it is one of the most powerful sounds. It was an alarm clock. And I have mobility challenges, but I practically sprang out of that bed to get to a window so that I could see
Uh,
where they were. And in fact, they were quite near, and all morning, off and on, they would do their mating dance and their call, and it was so loud and so striking. But at first, it's the kind of thing that I don't hear very often. So at first, I was really sort of jarred by it and trying to figure out what is that sound? Where is it? And
yeah.
until my brain clicked into place and said, the sandhill crane, what?
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
I just want to acknowledge that there are ways in which sometimes bird song or bird sounds are less sort of traditionally beautiful or melodious, but are so powerful still for identification and many other things, right?
Kat, as that morning progressed and you heard them, did you get the urge to climb up there with them? Because
Oh,
whenever I hear anybody migrating, it's like, let me come. I want to get as
right,
close as I
right.
can actually feel it.
Well,
Yeah.
the glorious thing is they weren't even migrating through. They were there for this mating season. And so
Oh, nice.
I actually got to watch them do their mating dance as well as hear them
Mm,
over the course of the morning as they would go farther away and come back. And
yeah.
I also, they were not shy about trumpeting their existence. And so because of that, it was pretty delightful to see, for example, kids come running because they were so curious. What is that sound? What is happening? Right?
Yes.
And the cranes were just so wonderfully accommodating in putting on both a sound show and a visual show. So it was delightful. I'm curious because one of the things that birdability is all about is accessibility in birding and working really hard to create access. And I'm curious about how you two think that birding by ear makes birding more inclusive for people with disabilities. Um, I know certainly you two and myself have shared our own personal experiences, but are there ways in which you have seen this writ large for folks?
Well, an interesting thing about birding by ear for anybody is that when you're birding visually, your angle of vision is
Mhm.
limited. When you're birding by ear, you can hear 360 degrees and up and down. I mean, there is no limit other than the limitations of hearing in general. So that's an interesting thing for anybody about birding by ear. And most of the really good birders I've met learn to bird by ear for that reason. But let's see. I sort of forgot what the question was.
No trouble.
Yeah.
I was asking about how it makes birding sort of more inclusive
Oh, yes.
for people with disabilities.
Well, for one thing, I can do birding from just about anywhere, including from inside my house, because I have two different types of microphones outside wired in so that I can listen to them on my computer speakers. I even have a device that plays my backyard. And believe me, I don't live in a nice rural birding area. I live in an urban area, but I can play my backyard via a website or also through an app on my iPhone, and I can hear the birds anytime I want to. So for me, though, birding by ear, I feel has given me some common ground with a lot of people because there are a lot of sighted birders in the world, and it just gives me something in common with them. Um, I don't always have an easy time finding people to go birding with, though. I will say that. And I'm a friendly guy and easy to guide, I think.
Yeah.
But I just don't.
Yep.
Some people are, they're into their own thing and they want to bird as fast as they can and write everything down. And there are various reasons, but I think the biggest one that concerns me is that people are fearful. They just don't know what to do, so they don't volunteer to do anything, and that's really unfortunate.
And Jerry, I want to build on that before Susan, then I want to come to you about it. But, that I think is one of the opportunities that we have with the Blind Birder Birdathon that's coming up on May
Yes.
18th. And Jerry, you are one of the people who approached me here at Birdability and one of three blind birders who said, we want to do this. And can you sort of provide some support for this? And we've just had a ball so far, working to put things in place for an entire day of birding by legally blind birders across the United States and beyond. And one of the things that we just added to the website today is actually a wonderful explainer video for folks who are interested in guiding or being available to guide for folks who are blind or low vision. And it just made me remember, as I was listening to that video this morning when we put it on the website, how much people are often afraid of saying the wrong thing, are afraid of hurting someone by saying, can I help you? Right. And there is this very fine balance of not wanting to assume that a person is incapable. They are absolutely capable. But there is also this piece that I think we're working really hard at Birdability and in many other places to try to lift up, which is that offering assistance is something that hopefully, if done with like loving care and a complete understanding that that person is entirely capable and will let you know what they need, can be a really beautiful way of being in community with others. And Jerry, that it makes me think of that because of what you were saying. Like people avoid, I think, sometimes the conversations, they move out of the way, they don't say, hi, my name's Kat. I see you're standing here. Are you looking for something? Can I help you in any way? And and I am hoping that our work for the Blind Birdathon and for working towards access and inclusion in birding overall will help to provide bridges for people to meet and to be in community together and to figure out ways to make that outward gesture. Susan, was there something you were going to say too? I want to give space for that.
I want to thank you and Jerry for organizing the Blind Birdathon, and I want to thank Birdability for all of this access work. I can only echo, what you've said, and if I'm in a birding event, what can be really hard if someone says, "What are you looking for?" and then they stumble and go, "I mean, what are you listening?" And I have to say, "Oh, no, it's a visual language. It's cool. Don't worry about it." That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or and I'm usually have my guide dog with me, and so there's that that we're working with too, and talking about sighted guide and such. And then just when you're in a big group birding, it's interesting to establish a balance between what people are doing, which is they have spotting scopes, they're going, "Oh, bird," and there's talking, but you need to hear what you're hearing. And so being able to articulate that balance of the sight and sound and listening can be really helpful and beautiful. And I just wanted to echo something that I think Jerry said. If I didn't hallucinate, make this up, but well, that happens as you get too old, but about being able to, bird from anywhere. If you have an open window, you can bird. If you're sitting on your patio, you can bird. If you're walking down a city street, you can bird. You have to have your I mean, for me, it's my bird antennae. They're always up. I want to tell a very brief story about my friend Gordon Barrett. He was a teaching colleague of mine at West Valley College. Gordon was quadriplegic due to a diving accident, and he was an avid birder and bird teacher at the various places around the Bay Area where we had our shorebirds and such. But Gordon and I would go birding together, and we were the perfect pair because he had his van, access for his chair. I'd get in there with my dog. We'd go drive someplace. We'd park. We'd walk until we found a place where he could see well and I could hear well, and we would just sit and just be and give each other different clues and teach each other different things. And he was just so special at this. And when my mother became more homebound, he brought her a spotting scope one day and he showed her how to use it. And he said, "There, now your window gives you some freedom." And she just loved, it was so cool. So it's really important to remember, there are all kinds of ways to take flight, and these are some of them.
Yep. And I used to have a friend who was a wheelchair user, and I found that a wheelchair made a great guide for me because he would always hit things before I would. And but it's really true. It was very easy for me to be guided by the back of his chair.
And I should apologize and say wheelchair user. I don't know if saying he was quadriplegic is appropriate anymore. He never cared, but I want to be careful. Just like we want people to be careful with us.
Yes. And we also, I think there are ways in which we signal our openness to learning, right? And we say, I use the term quadriplegic. Please let me know if that's not how you identify, or if that is not the best way. And that does not have to be something that, as you were saying, Susan, is all fumbly and makes you like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I said a word that had sight in it," right? Or a sighted word. That in fact, the attempts or the willingness to outreach and to be in community with others who aren't like us is made infinitely easier by the willingness to just say, "I'm learning. Please feel free to tell me anything I need to know about how to best be in community with you, or how to best be your friend," right? Like those are really easy things to do, to just say, "I'm still learning. This is the first time." And I think, Jerry, you and I, when we were in Ohio, I was going to come and guide for you. And I remember us texting back and forth, and or I guess it was emailing, and me saying, "Will it be hard? Because I actually use a forearm crutch," right? Like, I don't know how the forearm crutch and my sort of slow, staggery walk will work with your guiding needs. And we were, and you said, "Yeah, no trouble at all." But we wouldn't know if we didn't ask each other those things, right?
And those of us who are have a disability usually are pretty insensitive about things. I mean, we're very forgiving if somebody makes a mistake and uses a word that isn't even appropriate. Although the only ones that bother me are ones that are patronizing. Like there was a time when they used differently abled, which was implied something that just isn't accurate, and handy capable.
And special needs.
Those that redefines saccharine, I think.
Redefine saccharine. Yes. those terms are definitely ways to sort of try to be less uncomfortable or skirt around, whereas those of us with disabilities would easily just say, I am disabled. Like this is who I am. It is certainly a part of me. And so I'm just really grateful to you all for naming those things. I'm curious how you all think birding organizations and outdoor spaces can better support birders who rely on sound rather than sight or who are blind and navigating without sight. Are there ways that you instantly know, oh, this organization is welcoming me?
Well, I know that, and I want to, before I
Yeah.
don't get a chance to say it, I just want to say how much your help has meant to us, Kat, for this birdathon that we're working on. Because really, I mean, you've been fantastic. That's all I can say, and
Well,
I
thank
am
you.
deeply grateful for that. And I know my other two colleagues are too. But so the one organization that I'm involved with locally is the Massachusetts Audubon Society.
Mm,
And I know for a fact that they train all of their front end staff, all the people who are at the
mm,
bird sanctuaries who will meet the public when they come in on proper disability 101 kinds of etiquette and that sort of thing. So that tells me something. The fact that they have some braille signage on some of their things, not everywhere, but a lot of the places do, tells me that there are
mm,
people there who really care.
mm.
And I know that that organization is inclusive when it comes to birds and animals. They take birds that can't be rehabilitated in
Yeah.
some of their places. And it's the same with people. They really try to make their places and their facilities available to the broadest possible range of people.
I'm such a fan of the all persons trails
Yeah.
concept and the design and the ways that Mass Audubon has been implementing that for a long time is really exciting. And I'm always delighted to get to use all persons trails because I can bird with many of my friends with different disabilities, and all of us feel pretty welcomed and able, right, to navigate
Yep.
those spaces, which is just such a delightful thing that universal design
Yes.
brings to us.
Yeah.
How about you, Susan?
Well, Art, we're a little behind the curve. I'm a member of the Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance, formerly
Mm,
Audubon Society,
mhm,
and it's a beautiful place. But they didn't know about a lot of these issues. The current
mhm,
director, Matthew Dodder, is just fabulous, and
mm,
we went on a birding walk together last summer, and he just flat out said, "What do you need? What do you like?
yes.
Tell me, show me." And then he organized a bird walk for some blind and low vision friends of mine with me. And he had done all kinds of things like picked up pieces of bark that different woodpeckers had gnawed at. And he
Mm,
showed us the ones that had the acorn woodpecker holes and which ones
mhm,
had the sapsucker holes and how you could
mhm,
tell which was which by the texture. I mean, he really went out of his way.
mhm,
And then he said, we do not have Braille here yet. We do have an all-purpose trail. It's the one that I took you on and your friends. Can we work on this together this spring? So we're in
mm.
motion, which is
Oh,
really exciting.
wonderful.
And
Yeah,
he wants to know as much as he can, and he wants his staff to know as much as they can. So
yes,
I feel like it's a great learning opportunity, which is
yes.
why I'm listening so closely to what the two of you are saying, so I can communicate information that will really be useful.
I
I'll
love
just
that.
I'll brag a little bit about Mass Audubon to say that
Yes.
there's a guy that works at one of the sanctuaries there who I've told a lot of people there that two-dimensional drawings and etched graphs and pictures and things like that do very little for a blind person.
Mm,
For me to really understand what something looks like, it has to be three-dimensional.
mm,
So this guy started doing some three-dimensional, like bird skulls and things like that.
mm.
And then he decided to try Braille, and I was just sure that would be a failure because Braille is a very standardized system that
Yes.
if the dots are just a little bit further apart, it makes it difficult to read. Well, he put out a couple of Braille plaques,
Mm,
perfect Braille. I had no trouble reading it. And he's the first person I know of who's done Braille with a 3D printer. I'm
mm,
sure there have been other people, but I
sure.
was really impressed by that.
Yeah, that leads us really beautiful into a question that I have actually, because that's a new tool or technology. And
Yeah.
And I'm curious for the two of you if there are new technologies, new tools, resources that you recommend for people wanting to develop their ability to recognize birds by sound, but also in general in terms of access to the outdoors for folks who are blind or low vision.
Susan, you want to go first?
Well, sure. I was just thinking about, and I have to thank you, Jerry, for the bird wire recommendation
Oh,
because
Larkwire. Yeah.
Larkwire, that's what
Yeah.
it is.
Yes.
Boy, that has got me hooked. I'm having such a
Yeah.
good time with that. That's a great learning tool. We've got a lot of warblers coming through right now, and they are confusing my brain. So that's that's really been fun. Larkwire is great. Of course, Merlin. A lot of people know
Yes.
about Merlin, and I demonstrated how to use that with two of our local blindness organizations and so on. The other thing that's really neat is I know, Jerry, you know about all of Lang Elliott's recordings.
Oh,
Yes.
And
Yeah.
he not only does he have the Birdsong Tutor where you go kind of through a whole day or a couple days in a place, but he's got an app called Pure Nature, and it's recordings that he's done all over the country of birds, of crickets, and it's really well organized. And each one has a little liner that will tell you what it is. You can listen to it on your phone, and he'll tell you where they are, what date they recorded, what they're hearing. It's so neat. Now that wouldn't teach you individual birds, but it gets you into that deep listening mode. And that's something I use a lot just when I am working on other projects. When I'm writing, for instance, I'll have my Pure Nature app going in the background just because it's giving me the atmosphere that I need to do my work. But if he's got a marsh recording and he's told me to listen for, an American bittern and a pied-bill grebe, and then I'm ready for those. And I do learn them that way. It's a slower way. The other person who's done some really interesting work is Donald Kreutzma from UMass Amherst. And the book that fired my imagination was Birdsong by the Season, A Year of Listening to Birds. And I bet you both know about that one.
Oh, sure.
But he
Yeah.
goes around the country and he talks about, and he's interested in why they sing. And he's made cool discoveries about how they sing more than one song, and how some females in some species sing. And you can just put your headphones on and listen to this tour where he speaks, but then you also have all these recordings. Absolutely fabulous. And I just love his work in general. It also helps that he's from my grad school alma mater. I went to UMass, so that's kind of exciting.
I will tell you, he has a memoir of biking across the US with his son, and I listened to it on audiobook in part because I mean, it's all about listening to birds. And so having the opportunity to hear the birds on the audio book was such a terrific just merging, as you said, of the voice and the reading, but then also the bird sound that he's describing, which is fantastic. How
And
about
the geography,
Yeah, and the
he'll even say
geography.
funny things like, "Oh, that doggone motorcycle in the background," something like that. It's really cool.
We've come a long way. I remember when I first really got into birding and when I first started to learn to use the computer. By the way, birding has spawned a whole bunch of other hobbies in me. I got into writing HTML because I wanted to have a website to put my bird sounds on. I got into audio editing and all kinds of other things. But way back in the early days, I took a Stokes Field Guide set of bird recordings. I think there were 300 and some of them, and I alphabetized them in my computer in a folder so that it was very easy for me to find any one just by hitting the first letter of the bird's name. And I used that a lot because it was the only way I had of comparing what I thought I was hearing to what I heard. So I did that for a long time, but now, I mean, I can use any number of apps that are out there. Let's see, I use Larkwire, I use the Merlin Bird ID a lot.
Yes.
And I also, this device that I have that transmits my backyard via Wi-Fi is called Terra. It's Terra. And when it hears a bird, it speaks the name. My computer tells me what it's showing on the screen, and it says the name of the bird. And most of the time it's accurate, but it sometimes makes a really funny mistake. I heard it a couple of days. It kept saying, and you can go back and read
Mhm.
through each bird that it identified during that morning, and it kept talking about a great blue heron. And I don't live anywhere near water, and I was pretty sure there wasn't one of those around here. And I heard a dog bark, and I thought, that dog sort of sounds like a great blue heron.
Yeah.
And the next time it barked, I had the Terra on, and as soon as the dog barked, it said, "Great blue heron."
Oh, that's funny,
That's
Molly.
hilarious.
That's as funny as the parrot saying, "How you doing?"
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's great.
One of
I
the
got I got completely
oh,
bamboozled by a squirrel when I was about 20. I was in an ornithology class, and a friend and I were doing some recordings, and I was up really early on the UC Santa Cruz campus, and I was hearing this squeaking, and I was, where is it? Where is it? And I actually climbed off the trail, got into some brush, halfway up a tree, dropped my cane, recorded this creature, and learned later that it was simply a western gray squirrel. I mean, I was scraped up, I was muddy. I mean, oh, that was funny. It was just nuts.
oh, they can be tricky. They can be
Yeah,
tricky bird sounds, no doubt
yes,
about it. I
yeah.
am so grateful for all of the resources that you all were naming. And I do want to say that after this webinar today, I will send out to anyone who is registered, I'll send out a list of resources, some of which we've compiled for the May 18th Blind Birder Birdathon, and some of which you all have named, because there are so many terrific resources that are out there to connect people up, to teach birdsong and new tools and resources, and we want to make sure everybody has those. So I will send those out as a follow-up to today's webinar, as well as the recording, which will be on our YouTube channel in a week or so.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we like to make sure that folks can come back and revisit as they would like to, or find this anew if they weren't able to join us today. So we have about 5 or 10 more minutes, well, 8 to be exact. I'm really curious. I would like to ask you all if you could talk a little bit about something you hope participants take away from today. What do you hope people take away from this discussion about the power of birdsong? And I want to acknowledge we have about 30 people joining us on the webinar today, but Jerry and Susan, we had 287 people register so that they could receive the link for the recording.
Oh, great.
So we're
Yeah.
talking about clearly an area of great interest for people. When we talk about the power of birdsong, what do you hope people take away from this discussion today?
I think one thing that relates to disability that I would just like to
Mm.
say is that I hope this discussion we have illustrates that we who are blind or have other disabilities are not necessarily do not necessarily have less fulfilling lives,
Mm.
that we can find joy in our own ways, and that we are interested and animated and can
Mhm.
immerse ourselves in our lives in life if we choose to. That's the
Mhm.
one thing that comes to my mind.
Absolutely.
And that makes me think of the word community, Kat, as you were
Yeah.
saying, because if we are immersed in that beauty, and if others are joining us and they realize, oh my gosh, Jerry, look what he's able to,
Yeah.
they're going to relax and have a good time with it. And I think we need, I think the human flock needs to come together now more than ever. And I think this is one pastime that can bring us together, where we can drop enough of our differences that we simply appreciate them, and then we embrace more. I also hope people take from today the realization that you can bird anywhere and anytime. And you
Yeah.
know what? When you first start, if you don't know the name of it, don't worry about it. If you can remember what it's called, I mean, if if you
Mhm.
have your own name for it temporarily, that's okay.
Mhm.
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 That bird in my garden that kept saying gurgly, just whatever, so that you can watch for it for later.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
You're hearing it, you're becoming aware of it, you're noticing what it's doing.
Yes.
And
Mm.
I think just realizing that that is always available,
Mm.
if you allow it to be.
Mhm.
My interest in birding, I would say, has done a lot to shape my family, not just me.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mhm.
My children
Mhm.
You know, if I said, what does an Eastern towhee say? I'm sure they would know. Drink your
Yeah.
tea. But my children are both very much interested in nature. They're in their
Mhm.
40s now, but
Mhm.
they and their children, and people
Mhm.
are always sending me recordings and say, "Hey, I heard this bird the other day. What is
Yeah.
it?" And I always like that. But it has really enhanced the lives of everybody in my family, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I wrote a blog back in
Mhm.
November for Birdability, and I think I called it Community Care and Bird Breaks. And it really is about both of those things that you all just said, because for me, a deep part of what I think we're building when we're building nature and the outdoors that is accessible to people with disabilities is we're building a new way of being in community with each other, with nature, with the birds and the frogs and the crickets and the squirrels, even when they're tricking us. and and on top of that, Jerry, something you just said, which is when people are deeply connected to nature and to birds, it's impossible not to be infected with that in
Mhm.
some way, right? And to get interested in the world around us. And I just think there's such a beauty in that. And I love that you all lifted those things up because we need each other more than ever. And we also need nature. We need to be connected to and caring deeply about nature and the world around us.
And
And
you know, it's that
yeah,
connection, the feeling of isolation and being disconnected from society is the worst thing about
yes,
having a disability.
yes.
And I think birdability is a prime example of something that really, I don't want to use the word fights, but counteracts that
Mhm.
because it does connect us with each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so grateful to both of you for being here today, for being a part of this conversation. We could talk another 5 hours. I know that to be true because there's so much to talk about and so much joy. And if you put three people who love birds in a space, we have so many bird stories to share. And
Yes.
I want to remind folks that um, Birdability does have a number of opportunities. If you would like to be involved in this community, we have book groups every other month where we read or listen to books and then discuss those together. We have a Birdability Salon and Social Hour that happens on the fourth Thursday of every month in the evening, where it's really just a chance for us to come together and have conversations. We had so much fun at our last one. I just loved it. Jerry, you were there. We talked about
I
all
was.
kinds of different things.
Yeah.
And it was just such a heart filling opportunity. And I need my heart filled, friends. And
Mhm.
so please join us if you are interested. I also invite you to learn more about the Blind Birder Birdathon on our website. I'll also send out information about that if you are not already aware of it. Um, and I am really grateful for the ways in which the Blind Birder Birdathon is bringing people together again, not only from around this country, but I just saw in the chat, Rosa is joining us from Venezuela. They're one of the places that they have a team in Caracas who have 12 folks who are going to be, I think, participating in the Blind Birder Birdathon as well, and who are here today. So,
Wow.
what a way we're making connections with each other in the US and far beyond, because birds, as you started us off by saying, Susan, they travel and they help us be interested in geography and culture and people. And what a what an absolute gift to have spent this hour with you all talking about them.
It's a gift for us as well. It's really
Mhm.
exciting to know that there's so many people listening, and boy, that the team in Venezuela, I'd love to learn more. And
Yeah.
and Jerry, I want to come into your backyard website. That's too cool. I gotta. That's just
I can send
awesome.
you a link to it.
I'd be so much fun.
Oh, well, thank you all for joining us today, for being part of this conversation. I am just incredibly grateful, Jerry and Susan, for your time and for the ways that you all continue building community and teaching other folks to bird by ear. And I look forward to our continued opportunities to talk about birds, friends, in the
Well,
future.
thank you
So,
for inviting us.
yeah,
Thank
absolutely. Have
you.
a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and happy spring migration.
Yes, thank you.
Take good care, y'all.
Okay.
Bye.